with my brother and my relationship with him, I was in a real good place with my parents, and my mom died about 10 years ago. And it was really, really difficult on me. My mom and I were very close, and it was unexpected. And like by now, I'd spent about 10 years in the field of addiction, getting people sober. And I would tell people, like, my job is to give people hope.
Right.
It's 30 days to try to find a light in you and plug it into something. And so I got called down to the hospital, and looking back, what had happened is Mom had a blood clot travel up her leg and blow up in her heart.
Oof.
But when she got to the hospital, they did a stroke test, and at that moment in time, she passed the stroke test, and they didn't know what it was, but she was talking in a fugue state, like a real high little girl. And I went running in there, and she was just out of it. My mom had the same eyes as my brother. They're real pale blue. And she was like this little girl's voice going, "It hurts, it hurts."
Wow.
And I said, "Mom, I'm here now. What hurts?" And she stopped, and I was so grateful for this moment. She stopped and grabbed my hands and looked directly at me and said, "Honey, how did you know to come?" So me being me, I crack a joke. I'm like, "Well, I said if you went to the hospital without telling me, I was going to move in with you and bring tape." And normally that would make her laugh. And went right back into that fugue state. And I stood there like so helpless because I couldn't give her hope. I couldn't take her pain away. And then I saw her eyes fix on the ceiling, and she flatlined. And they worked on her mother for this is what the truth does to you. My mom, they're working on her in teams of 3, and they would work for about 5 minutes and then have to switch out because it's such an exertion. My mom was completely naked and covered by a sheet. And I sometimes the sheet would come down and I could hear him cracking her ribs. And I'm watching this whole thing, and all I can think is cover her up. She wouldn't want anybody to see her like this.
Right.
She'd hear in the bed, please don't let anyone see her like this.
Right.
That's how modest my mother was. And anyway, I finally called it because it just was not good. And I was the only kid there. And so all the family comes out, and my dad had passed many years ago. And for a moment in time, it was us denial kids, and we were all together. And I kind of felt like it was us against the world again, and I had a seat at the table again.
Right.
And so, unbeknownst to me, my mom had put Carlin in charge of the will. And we went through the week of funerals, and all these people came. There must have been like 500 people, came through to pay their respects.
Wow.
My mom was loved. She was quite a person. And, you're just suddenly back in like the truth land.
It's like all those people you're saying, it's all from the 2x2s coming from all over because your dad had a high position.
Awkward.
That's wild.
And Carlin had married by now and had kids. And through the process of me getting my life together and going to work in the field of addiction, I had made peace with everyone. So Carlin in my 30s I started speaking to him again about 30.
Okay.
And we had a cordial, nice relationship. But that day when he took my inheritance, and my brother Kim, my Korean brother Kim, who I love, he's been more of a brother to me than any of them. He pulled me off to the side and he said, "They're going to take your money." And I said, "They can't take my money. I saw what Mom said, divided between 5, and he said they're going to." And so everybody was leaving. The funeral was over, and we'd had a week of, festivities, or, well, not festive, but whatever. And so I went up the next morning to Mom's house, and I said to Carlin, "Kim tells me that you've read the will, and I haven't, and I would like to see a copy of it." And he looked at me, and his eyes, those blue eyes, kind of changed. They weren't black, but I saw like a real hard look come over him. And he walked into the back, and I kid you not, he came out with the will and he flicked it across the table at me like I was just a piece of garbage. And I looked at him and I'm like, "You don't get to keep my money." And I saw in him that day, that was 10 years ago. I saw something that wasn't my brother that I knew growing up. It was whatever was in him was growing, I feel.
Right.
And I don't, if it's mental illness, I don't know if there was things going on, but that kid that I grew up with, he wouldn't have done that.
Right.
This guy. And so Paul, my ex, was in the middle of a big election,
mm-hmm.
and my recourse at that time was to sue. And so we had a lot of conflicts back and forth. Did I need the money? If I sue, they're going to use that against us in a political campaign. Greedy Pacheco, Sue's own family.
Right.
I mean, believe me, the political headlines, it's a nightmare.
Right.
And after 3 or 4 months, I made the decision. I honestly wanted him to do the right thing. And I kept thinking he'll do the right thing. I believed that he would ultimately do the right thing, and he did not.
So people watching will see why this relationship with your brother is so important, what it's going to be culminating to shortly.
Yeah.
But then going back to when you're in high school, what you witnessed with your brother after the breakup, were you experiencing this type of evil stuff with other people, like seeing people change or, abuse?
Yes and no. So not at the time. And so with Carlin, there were just moments like that. And that's critical to this story just because of where we wound up.
Yep.
But for my personally, Kate gave me notes and told me to stay on task.
To say what?
Kate gave me notes and told me to stay on task. I'm like, well, what?
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Check my timeline over here. So when I was 17, 18, when I left home, I went out one night with my friend, and she was meeting a guy. I was always the designated driver. And so we went square dancing or country western dancing at a big western nightclub there. And she was dating Brian. So we closed the bar down, and she decided to ride home with him. And she told me, give me 5 minutes or so we can make out in the parking lot or whatever. And then we were going to go to her apartment. So it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'm driving around waiting for her, and I run out of gas. Now, I hadn't been out on my own very long, so I don't have the same sense of danger that normal people do.
Mm-hmm.
I just know the whole world is supposed to be bad, and so far, I think they're all full of shit.
Right.
So I was kind of fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, I got to push my car. I got to get it out of the road. So this guy rolls up, and he had it was a Lincoln Continental. I've always been a car person. To this day, I know all cars. And I remember thinking to myself, and he was dressed nice. He was a Hispanic man, probably in his 40s, and he smelled nice. And he said, "Can I help you push your car?" And I said, "Yeah, you can." And I thought, he kind of passed my little innocent check mark. Why would a predator help me push my car? And we get it up on the parking lot, and he says, "Can I give you a ride home?" And I swear to God, I looked over at my friend's apartment, and I thought, she's probably in bed. I stood there looking at her apartment thinking I should walk across the street to her apartment. And then I thought, it's been an hour. She's probably in bed. By now it was like 3:00.
Mm-hmm. And
I looked at him, and he said, "I can give you a ride. You shouldn't be out here late at night." And I said, "Okay." So we get to the parking lot of my apartment complex, and we just made small talk on the way home. And we get there, and I go to open the door. I didn't even see his hand, and he went boom, and he hit me right in the nose and broke my nose, and then grabbed my hair and crashed my head into the window. And he sexually assaulted me that night, beat me within an inch of my life, dumped me out in my own parking lot, and told me not to tell anyone, or he knew where I lived, he'd come back.
Oh, wow.
And that guy turned out to be, I was his first victim. He turned out to be a serial killer, the Northeast Heights rapist who went on to kill.
Holy
and
crap.
Why he didn't kill me, I have no idea.
This evil just seems to follow you, Tami.
It's this weird thing. And so in seeking why and trying to figure out, I went with my mom. So here's another example of the truth in action. My boyfriend in California was a California highway patrolman. He got in his truck and drove straight out. Like I didn't even know to call the cops.
Right.
That's how sheltered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what do I do? And I was like sobbing,
Right.
and they called the cops from California, and he just got in his truck and drove. And when he got in, he said, we have to tell your mom and dad. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. No, we're not telling them. And he said, you have to tell your mom and dad. I would want to know. And I said, look, I'll tell my mom. I will not tell my dad. So we go and we go to lunch, and I walk in. This is the depth of the roots of the truth. My nose is broken. My eyes are black and blue. And I walk in and I give my mom a hug. And I said, I need to tell you something. Something really bad happened. And she leaned forward and said, you're pregnant.
Does this look like I'm pregnant? Right.
No. And then I told her, I said, and then I looked at Mark and I'm like, I told you I shouldn't tell them.
Right.
And I said to her, no, it's a little worse than that. I was raped. And she started sobbing, and I'm the victim. And I said, Mom, I reached over and I took her hand and I said, Mom, look, it'll be okay. It's okay. And she said to me, no, it is not okay. It has never been okay with you, and it never will be okay with you. And that 18-year-old child, that imprinted on my heart. And, oh, look, that's bringing up emotion. I set out for the next decade to live exactly like that.
Wow.
That I wasn't okay and I would never be okay. And I'm telling you, only God did that for me, got me through that. God has made such a difference. And for me to be able to stand today with everything I know and still not hate religion and still not hate God.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that, because you had a kind of twisted upbringing in terms of how they teach the New Testament. So you never really, I mean, obviously you shed the 2x2 religion, but you didn't lose religion altogether.
I didn't really lose my relationship with God. And I don't know why. I can't explain that, except that I just always loved God, and I hated all religion for what they made the people do, if that makes any sense.
Right.
I felt I was trained to hate the Catholics. These fancy churches, they're all, that's definitely not what God wants.
Right.
So stepped away from it all. And through the process of recovery and learn, like, that's one thing about AA that I will forever be grateful for is so many people have been able to come in and get help by just opening up the concept of a power greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you really pay attention to what it says in the books, it really is all about God. They have a line in the book that says God either is or he isn't. And that was my issue on the subject of demons. So we believe in God, and we believe in Jesus, and we believe that Jesus is coming back, but we don't believe in demons. Well, are we supernatural or are we not?
Right.
My questions just never got answered for me. Nobody could answer them. They were just like, oh, no, it doesn't work that way now, Tami. There's not demons. And I'm like, well, what about the things I've seen? Right. Why are people doing the things that they've done, So I quit talking to them about it. But I found people, I still wouldn't label the truth as a cult. I just said it was just the religion that my parents, grew up in. And when the murder happened, and we'll get to that, one of the interesting things was my brother was diagnosed in the year of COVID with the same disease that Bruce Willis has. So It's a real rare dementia.
Right.
And like in my brother's case, his memory was not affected. So sometimes it's not diagnosed right away because it doesn't have the same markers as Alzheimer's and so probably things had been going on for a long time, and his wife Connie didn't tell any of us because you tend to sort of keep that. He was a very proud man, and after Mom died, he became an elder in the church, and I find out that the way you become an elder in the church is through gifting. Right. If you have things.
Right.
So interesting for me to find out that the inheritance that was taken from me,
that's where it went.
And he became an elder.
Right.
And
you have to give away everything, right? Isn't that what a lot of them do?
Well,
I mean, everything in quotes, you know.
My brother was an electrician. My brother lived in a beautiful home. My brother made a lot of money. My brother, you know, but the more you give, and the money that they took from me for him, that was a good use of it. They gave, Mom had just bought, I don't think it was a Lincoln. It was a quintessential old person's car. One of the nice Lincoln Marquis, or, you know, top of the line, like big bomber caddy that old people like to drive.
Right.
Like, I was supposed to get that car. There were several things that I was supposed to get, which I didn't really care about the car other than sentimental, but he gave that all to the workers. And the next thing you know, he now has a meeting in his home in Tucson, and he is the elder, you know. And I've always been very conflicted in talking about Carlin because he has two beautiful children that I love very, very, very much. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to see anything negative about their dad.
Right.
But my story is my story, and what happened to me happened. And I think if we're ever going to make sense of it, I look at, this is kind of off topic, but like I look at the Olympics, that shit show of an opening.
That was crazy.
I'm like, if you had told me 3 years ago that I would suddenly see demonic influence everywhere, I would have said you're. And it's like once the veil is lifted and once you start seeing and start asking questions, you can't unring that bell.
And I would encourage you to go back and watch other Olympic openings from the last 10 years. And I think you'll see demonic things in them. You know, there's that one from 2012 where the kids are in the hospital beds getting injected and ghouls flying around. It's pretty wild. And I think COVID woke a lot of people up to how depraved people can get, especially those in power. And now people are rewatching that and being like, that's interesting. That's not right at all.
When you start looking, you take someone like me who I've been non-religious my whole life, very God-connected, very spiritual. Like I've done a lot to keep myself close to God, but I was really uncomfortable saying Jesus, and saying I've accepted Jesus Christ. And so for me, like, why am I uncomfortable saying that? Like, what is it? Like, it just always like icky to me. Like, just let me do the spiritual thing. And then the murder happens and my son finds Christ.
Let's get to that story now. So when the murder happens, is this after we were talking before we went live about leaving California? Is that so?
Just before
the murder's before?
The year of COVID, Carlin was diagnosed with FTD.
Okay.
None of us knew, and my sister called me. I was in Albuquerque, still married at the time, and I get a call, and they said that Carlin had gone missing for like 7 hours, and they were in Scottsdale at the Mayo Clinic trying to get a diagnosis. They'd gone back and forth numerous times. They ruled out like Parkinson's and the usual things that you figure out when somebody starts acting goofy.
Yeah.
And I guess he like took the car and just disappeared. So unbeknownst to her, Carlin's lost a bunch of weight and he's very thin. And I hadn't seen him in a number of years. And even the last time I saw him, I thought he looked odd. I remember we were at the bookstore, Barnes & Noble, and we ran into him and Connie, and Tate got to see him. And all of us commented how thin he looked, that he didn't look like himself. And so that was a year before. And then COVID happened. He gets, right as the lockdowns went, he made it back to the house. And here's the interesting thing. So this disease that they have disconnects emotion. And Carlin's whole world was connected to his status in the truth. So my sister called me and said that he had made it back home, but they had to call for help, and the cops were there, and he was being taken to the psych ward. He had curled up in the fetal position and was pounding on his chest and saying, "I can't find my soul. I can't find my soul." I remember thinking, "Oh, wow, that's an interesting choice of words." And I told my sister, the truth is everything to him. And so, if something's happened, right at that point, I'm thinking it's the disease and mental illness. And I'm thinking he's probably cognizant enough to know that it cut him off, that he's not feeling the same things that he felt, and he's feeling hurt and angry and scared around that. And so he was there for like 3 weeks. And again, my role, like I don't step in unless they ask me to, and they wouldn't release him because I don't know.
Right.
Psych wards. And so I told my sister to tell Connie, if she needed me to step in and get him home to let me know. And so after about 3 weeks, Connie called and said, would you help? And I got my doctor that ran my treatment facility, and we got him on a medical transport home. And I want to tell you that when he took my inheritance, it broke my heart again. And I didn't speak to him for another 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And I was the one that picked it. So they're the Christians, right? Mm-hmm. They're the people with God. I'm the sinner. But the backpack of anger I had that I was carrying was like weighing me down. I used to liken it to belly crawling with a big thing of rocks on my. That's what it felt like. Like I was angry at them all. Like fuck you all, man. Yep. And finally I knew that like if I didn't make peace, I was the one hurting. They're not thinking about me. Mm-hmm. They're all living their lives going, oh, Tammy's in another one of her moods.
Right.
And so I sent my brother, it was first year Trump was running. I sent my brother a text and I said, do you have a minute to talk? And he'll never know, of course, that I sat on that in front of the ocean on a bench. And it took me about half an hour to pick up the phone and even text him because I didn't want to, because I was with them all.
Yeah.
But I was like, God, I can do this. You give me the strength. I can do this. So I send the text, and he sends me back a text and says, not if you're going to be digging up bones. And I almost threw my phone in the ocean. I was like, you know what? Screw you.
Right.
And then I was like, no, this is a mission. You've been directed to do it. So I said, I threw away my shovel. So he calls me, and we talked about Trump. I don't know. But that opened the door. So now you fast forward, and I'm helping my brother come home. And I had such a rush of gratitude because I thought if he had died and I had not been able to tell him I forgive him, I don't know how I would have felt. That's where my heart was,
It would haunt you.
I got to tell him that, and it was real weird talking to him because he seems normal, right? Hi, Tammy. And, we talk, and I'm looking at him going, oh, my God, you are whacked out, son. So he goes into that facility, and they got him diagnosed properly and regulated. And and the lockdown has been on for about 4 months now. Part of his behavior patterns were trying to harm himself. So while he was in the hospital, I had to go to their house and help Connie get rid of all knives, all sharp objects, because Connie didn't have a clue. It's like, when you need something to be found in your house, you want me because I'm used to drug addicts and I can toss a house better than anybody. I know where they hide it. I know every trick in the book. And, that's kind of how it was with him. He was an electrician, and he had probably 1,000 different knives in his garage and storage and whatever. And also, let me say, the man never was a hunter. The man never went hunting a day in his life. So note that. But
and real quick, Connie was a part of the 2x2s. Everyone in the family was in it. Yeah.
My mother loved her. And, when I was a lot younger, before I did all the work and sat down with them all at various times and talked about, why we were estranged. And I came into that whole thing in my 30s is when I was moved to try to make peace with my family. And I just went in from a place, I'm sorry if I wasn't a good sister. And that I did that were harmful or hurt you, I'm really sorry. And that sort of opened the door for us all to have, I don't think they ever said they were sorry for much of anything. My mom did. My mom and I talked. My mom was fantastic. My mom, I asked her if she remembered the conversation about the rape. And this is when I knew, this is the moment. Like if you're a parent and something happens and you say something off the cuff to your kid and the kid imprints on it and you have no idea. I said to my mom, do you remember what you said to me? And she goes, no.
Right.
And I said, And I told her, and she started crying and said, well, what did I mean? And I had this like moment of clarity. Oh my God, you just were a pervert.
Right.
She was horrified and blurted something out. And my dumb ass took that and said, yeah, I'm worth nothing.
Right.
I have no.
Personal.
Yeah. You created a whole identity out of something that was just, flippant from your mom.
From pain.
Yeah.
And that's how dumb, that's how we get caught in these like cycles. But with Carlin then, Connie Connie backed him up on the whole inheritance thing. Mm-hmm. So I was really angry with Connie too for a long time. And I had not really talked with Connie up until he got put in the hospital. I talked with Carlin and I made my peace with Carlin. But the thing is that Connie's role in that was, I felt like when Mom died, she co-signed Carlin's bullshit, for lack of a better way of saying it. Mm-hmm. And she was wrong. And so I always feel like, if my husband had done that to his sister, I might not have been able to change the outcome, but I'd been up on it.
Right.
And I'd been like, that's not right, Paul. Don't do that. That'll come back to bite you.
Right. Don't
take things yours. So I didn't have a lot of fond feelings around Connie, and I felt I would just had never. And then I saw her pain, and I saw how horrified she was at my brother, and she didn't know what to do. And like my heart just like there was so much compassion because this is a man that she loved him. She was a good, kind, pure soul. She just they're taught that way. They're brainwashed.